Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. It feels lovely to say that again and to be standing in front of the camera, even if I'm keeping it pretty casual today with the hair and basically no makeup. But I figured I'd check in because I said that I was back and then I kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. So I figured today's video would be a nice little catch up, and I'll talk about what I've been reading and what my reading plans are for the month of June as well. And I'll also explain why I'm probably not going to do like a traditional wrap-up video for May or traditional like June TBR for June. So a lot of things to discuss. So why don't we dive right in? Okay, so firstly, where the heck have I been? It's been a mixture of a lot of stuff. So as I had mentioned previously, I was dealing with a lot of personal stuff that was highly stressful, as well as just the state of the world, which still just seems to be getting worse and worse here in the United States. But yeah, it's been a weird May. May was meant to be like my reset month, and honestly, it didn't happen the way I had planned. Firstly, as I had put in like my community page, I got the plague. I caught COVID after over 2 years of avoiding it and 2 years of basically living like a hermit. And apologies for any storming that you hear in the background. That's exciting. As I was saying, I ended up getting COVID. I filmed a vlog of my like quarantine, but we'll see if I actually get to upload it because I'm having issues with those particular files. But basically what happened was that I'm pretty certain I got it from a work event. It was a 450 person event that I attended and worked. I was wearing a mask, no one else was. So I'm pretty sure that I got it from there, especially because a number of other people who were at the party also tested positive. And I tested positive pretty quickly after the party. It was like Monday or Tuesday, and then I was woken up at 4 a.m. in the morning on Friday because of just how crummy I felt. I woke up with a splitting headache, achy all over, and also really exhausted. But I actually tested negative that day. But I was just like, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's a duck. So I started isolating from my family. I tested positive the next morning, and basically for the next 2 to 3 days, I was just miserable. The cough developed. The headache, I think, was probably the worst of it because it was like in the center of my face, like a sinus headache, and it was just so bad that my eyes were constantly watering. So even though I was sick in bed, which would have been perfect time to read, I was just not up for it. I ended up taking 2 days off work, and then basically that week I was still really exhausted, still had the cough, so I wasn't feeling really up to myself, and I still tested positive day 6 of my isolation, so I continued to isolate for the full 10 days, and the reading vlog is over that like final weekend because I was feeling much better. I still had the cough. I still have the cough, but like I was back to feeling normal otherwise. So I did a lot of reading and tried to use that to reset myself. So that was why I was a little dark, because I unexpectedly got sick and really wasn't feeling myself and didn't have the energy to film. Thankfully though, my household remained negative. So going into isolation, wearing the mask around the house when I did have to leave my room seems to have worked, which I'm grateful for, because my worst fear has always been like transmitting it or passing it to someone whose immunity is compromised or who might get it worse than I did. Because at the end of the day, it was uncomfortable, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been, and so I'm very, very fortunate for that, and that is likely because I'm vaccinated and boosted, so happy for that. So there was that absence, and then the months of like stress and anxiety culminated in a very, very happy event. So one of the things that I've kind of been keeping behind the scene is essentially that at the beginning of the year I started house hunting. And the process has been really stressful given kind of the housing market since COVID. It is really, really competitive, I think basically everywhere, but especially in my general area just because we're not too far from the city. It's easily accessible. And it was one of those situations where you couldn't get attached to any particular house because every single house on the market that was worth contemplating buying was getting multiple offers. So I made a total of 3 offers on 3 houses. Had a situation where the first house I made an offer on, the offer got accepted, and then I had to walk away when the inspector was just like, well, you really need to get a structural engineer to look at this because I think there are some issues, but I'm not an expert. And then when the structural engineer came in with their report, it was not good. I did not want to risk that investment. So although I had like become attached to that house, I was envisioning myself in that house, I ended up, as I said, walking away. So that was stressful. And then because I was looking kind of in winter and very early spring, there weren't a ton of houses on the market. Like, things tend to open up once the weather starts to get good. So I was really grumpy over the fact that I couldn't, go and see houses because I wasn't seeing houses like added to Zillow and Redfin and all of those things. There was just nothing there. And then I did see a house. It needed a lot of work. I placed an offer, but it wasn't accepted. I was apparently the close second. So that time I didn't get super attached because I'd been around the block once or twice by then. And then the third house was one that was being sold by the owner, and I scrambled to go see it and put in an offer, not really thinking that anything was going to come of it, because I was told that he had a ton of interest in the house, and also that one of the people who had been looking at the house was contemplating or had suggested that they were going to be making a cash offer, which I knew if someone made a cash offer, like, this person would be foolish to turn it down. So I didn't get my hopes up, but the offer was accepted. And so basically since March, I have been in negotiations and contracts for this house, and it closed on May 26th. I got the keys, I signed all the paperwork, so I am now officially a homeowner after about 2 months of viewing the house, getting the offer accepted, the inspection, the appraisal, dealing with the bank to make sure I could get the financing, surveys, all of that stuff that's required in order to actually buy a house. I've been stressing out over because it just all felt like it could slip through my fingers at any moment because of this market. So it's a huge relief, because I absolutely love this house that I bought and am really excited to make it my home. I'm a first-time home buyer, and it's been a dream of mine for basically a decade, since I graduated from college, and it always seemed out of my grasp because of student loans and just how expensive it is to live in this area. And then I had the upset with the first house that I talked about, but this house really feels so perfect, so me, and I'm so excited about it. I'm taking basically June to slowly like do what I need to do there and move my stuff up there. But it's lovely. I'm so excited to be a homeowner and like to live in a house that is so steeped in history. This house is 140 years old. It was built in 1880, so it's this gorgeous little Victorian house with like all of these original features, including original floors, and I'm I'm so stoked. You have no idea. But that's been weighing on me for, as I said, 2 months, and it's just been really, really stressful until it wasn't, and until the closing went like so smoothly. It was done in 35 minutes. So, yeah, all that stuff to say that's where I've been. I've been sick and I've been in the process of buying a house. So, it is what it is. Unfortunately, BookTube took the back seat for a moment, but I am looking forward to getting back into the swing of things. So, what exactly does this mean for June? I'm not going to say that I'm going to be back to my usual programming of 2 videos a week, just because I know right now there is a lot going on. I'm going to be spending basically every weekend doing stuff for the house, whether it's like doing the like repair work that needs to be done, or like just making sure stuff get delivered, like a washer dryer, a bed, internet needs to be installed, but also like getting all of my stuff up there and ordering a lot of stuff, because as I've mentioned on this channel, I've basically lived out of my childhood bedroom for the last decade. So really all I have is the stuff that is in my room, which has served as an office since the pandemic, my bedroom, and living room. So all of that stuff needs to be moved, especially, and also stuff that I've like put in storage from when I was in college. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be taking up my time in June, in addition to a work trip, which means that I will be in Chicago once again for 5 days of nonstop running around the merchandise mart. So yeah, I can't guarantee that June will be a super like regular BookTube month for me. However, I do have some stuff planned for June that hopefully I'll be able to pull off. I want to do a trash my TBR video or two to help me to kind of unhaul some books that I have on my shelf in preparation for the move, because there are definitely books on these shelves that have been there for a really long time that I haven't gotten around to that should probably go, but I need to be a little bit more ruthless than I'm used to, and I tend to consider myself ruthless, so I'm going to ask you guys for help on that, if you don't mind. So that's something I'm planning to do. As I said, I did film a COVID vlog, which I would hope will go up in June as soon as I can figure out why the heck the files won't move from my iPhone to my computer, but that's a story for another day. I know like there'll probably be an unhaul video, and if anyone is interested in a moving vlog or anything about the house, I know that's not the purpose of this channel, but let me know. I'm more than happy to share things if that is of interest to anyone. So let me know. But yeah, so not promising 2 videos a week, but hopefully you'll start seeing me a little bit more in June, and hopefully come July, when I'm settled in my own home and don't have to worry about like noises from other people. I kid you not, I was about to film this video and my sister started vacuuming, and I'm filming through a thunderstorm because when else am I going to film? But that won't be an issue, and I'll have like an office slash library, which will be amazing. So I'm looking forward to like sharing the creation of that space with you once that starts actually happening. But yeah, that's what I have to say about June. And now that I've given you a very long spiel on what I've been up to and why I haven't been around on my channel, it's time to talk about the books, which, if you are only interested in this part of the video, there was a timestamp, so hopefully you just skipped right on along to it. But I'm going to talk about the books that I read in May, the books that I'm currently reading, and kind of my reading plans for June. And we're kind of squeezing it all together for a number of reasons. For one, I didn't read much in May. I only read 3 books, so it wouldn't be much of a wrap up. May was meant to be my reset month, as I had talked about in my May TBR, where I picked a bunch of books that I am very, very excited about, that I am still very, very excited about, but reading really took the back burner this month. So this is the weakest month quantity-wise since I started my channel, but quality-wise, it was really great. So that's one reason we're kind of squeezing it into this video, because there wouldn't be much to talk about. I am currently reading 2 or 3 books right now, so I wanted to check in on that. And also, I am not doing a June TBR because, as I mentioned, June is going to be a little bit crazy with me trying to set up a house. And that is going to be exciting and fun, but also probably very stressful. Not probably, definitely very stressful. So I don't want to put any goals for myself that are destined to fail, if that makes sense. I just kind of want to mood read a bit in June, pick up books as I'm able, and then hopefully come July, I'll be back to my regular programming. I'll be in my own house by myself, enjoying it. So that's what we're going to try to do. But the first book that I want to talk about was the book that I read at the very beginning of May, The Iraqi Nights by Dunya Mikhail, which was actually the pick for April for our Found in Translation book club. This is a book that is translated from Arabic and is a collection of poetry. We already excuse me, we already did the live show, and it was really, really, really interesting to hear Noelle and Annie's insights and to also have people chatting with us in the comments. But I'm not someone who reads a lot of poetry, so I was not comfortable with trying to give this a star rating, even though I did really enjoy it. I think that overall this was a beautiful, beautiful read. It dealt a lot with war and death, and even though those topics were very heavy, it was very elegant in the way that it talked about those things, but also some of them really hit you in the feels and were just truly lovely. This is one of the few times that I dog-eared a book or wrote in it, but I marked some of my favorite poems. Tablet was one, which some of the poems had these beautiful illustrations and things attached to them, and on the live stream I was just like, I would love to understand the Arabic that's around some of these images. And someone was like, they're probably translated in English at the top. And I was like, duh, Brittany. But stuff like this, like the tablet, was just absolutely beautiful. It's a 3-line poem, and it just hit me where it needed to. Another one of mine, which I think was probably my favorite in the collection, was A Second Life, which was one that I starred. It was a longer one. And then also, where is it? Flaw Chart, which had this interesting illustration. I don't know if you can see it all that well, but just the words and how it depicted what it was trying to say really hit a chord. So those were just a few of the poems that really, really did it for me. But overall, I did think this was a great collection, and as someone who doesn't read a ton of modern poetry, I could definitely appreciate it for what it was, because we did have such wonderful conversations. The next 2 books I actually read over the course of my COVID reading vlog because I was isolated and really wanted to get to them. So I read the last 2 books in Pat Barker's Regeneration trilogy, which was The Eye in the Door and then also The Ghost Road, which is her Booker Prize winner. So I really enjoyed both of these books. They were both 4-star reads for me. And as I've come to expect from Pat Barker, the writing is just beautiful and she pulls no punches. So it was great. I mean, if you're someone who is into World War I think this is a great short series. I don't think any of the books are over 300 pages. But what I also really liked about this is that it was a totally different take on war literature. This was very strongly anti-war throughout the entire book, and that was just refreshing, I think, because it was a perspective that I've never read about, even though I've read so many books on World War I and World War II and just various wars throughout history. So The Eye in the Door was interesting because this book is kind of about the middle of World War I, where the British public are kind of getting war weary and they're looking for scapegoats for the war not seeming to go their way. And the people that they scapegoat are the gay men and also the conscientious objectors, so the men who don't want to fight for various reasons. And so the book explores that in detail with various characters who are impacted either directly or indirectly. And I would say that this is the book that is on the grittier side and has a little bit more sexually explicit detail than I think the other two books in the series. So just bear that in mind if you're going into it. But I really enjoyed it, and The Eye in the Door and how that symbolism comes up in the book, the way that more female characters started to kind of play a more integral part of the book, because this is definitely a collection of stories, a collection of books rather, that focuses primarily on male protagonists and characters. So to have a few more women involved in the overall story was also really great, because those are the stories that I tend to be drawn to in general. So it was, I wouldn't say it's a good time, because it's dealing with a war and it's dealing with prejudice and a lot of really uncomfortable feelings about how society treats people, but it was a really good read, and like I'm used to with Pat Barker, the writing was very, very beautiful and gritty and raw at times, and definitely made you think, and that's what I love most about her. If you want more play-by-play sort of responses, hopefully the reading vlog will go up so you can hear a little bit more about that. The next book in the series is The Ghost Road, which is the Booker Prize winner. I went into this with really, really high expectations, and it didn't disappoint. As I said at the beginning, it was 4 stars, but I think I still enjoyed Regeneration a little bit more, and I think that's just because of the format of this book, and maybe there was just a little too much going on. So we're finally on the front in this book, in the trenches in France with the character of Sassoon, which means that this book has more violence and more gore than the other 3 books. But Sassoon had been treated for what is now known as PTSD. He's back on the front. He's serving again. He's an officer, so he's in charge of a bunch of men. And we're interacting with him and learning about his experience through journals and journal entries, which can be hit or miss. I didn't mind it here, but also I would have rather it have just been from his POV than him trying to write it down or documenting it in that way. But then with Dr. Rivers, who is a psychiatrist who has been treating these men throughout the course of these 3 books, he is trying to kind of understand what is happening with the war and sort of the culture of the war by trying to draw parallels or connections with his time in the South Seas when he was a missionary and was staying with a tribe and studying the culture of death there, which is interesting, but it was a little anthropological. I wasn't entirely sure if I really liked that aspect of the book. Like, I think it tied up neatly at the end, but I don't know, it was not my favorite way to approach this story. Again, I kind of just would have liked it to be straightforward in the way that it had been in the other books, but you had kind of started to see these threads in book 2 because he starts talking about this time when he was a missionary, or it's referenced. So was I surprised? No. Did I think that it was going to be as large of a part of this book as it ended up being? No. I will say that. But overall, this was a really, really great World War I piece of fiction. I think it was as good as it was for me because of the way that it really looks at the cost of war, not in the sort of traditional sense where it's death or it's injuries like physical maiming that is like visible to the eye. It's more about that internal sort of injury and harm that is done to these men, because it looks at sort of the mental state and the emotional turmoil that they're going through. And that was just really fascinating. As I've said when I've talked about regeneration, like, your heart bleeds for these men, and some of them, like, their trauma actually manifests itself in physical ways, and seeing that and hearing about that and understanding that was just really, really fascinating. So, as I said, if you want to read more about World War I would highly recommend these books. Okay, so now to talk about what I am currently reading, or at least trying to. It is slow going, not gonna lie. But the first book is one that was on my May TBR, and that's The Light Years by Elizabeth Jane Howard, which is the first book in this Cazalet Chronicles, which is a family saga about this well-to-do family in England, and basically everything that happens to the members of that family over the course of World War II. I learned about it first because I watched the TV series that was based on this first book and really enjoyed it and its cast. But I started reading this. I am not super far in it. I want to say I'm just under 100 pages in, and I'm really enjoying it so far. But I would say at this point, it is a bit of a slower read just because there's so much information that is being thrown at you about these different characters in this family. Like, we're learning about a few, like, the Cazalet brothers and their wives. We're learning about their children, and they're all sort of, they're actually characters. None of them really feel as though they're supporting characters. It feels like they're all main characters. And so there's a lot of detail here. This is not a book that is going to be a fast read, I don't think, which is fine because I tend to prefer those slower paced books. I do also really love a good tome, as you know, and this is a tome. But at this point, not a lot has happened. It's just getting to know the characters and to kind of understand the dynamics within the family. But, like, the war hasn't been mentioned at all. Like, you wouldn't know necessarily that this is a book about World War II because it just seems like it's these people going about their everyday lives in the late 1930s. So, do I think I'm going to enjoy it? Yes. But it is definitely a book that is somewhat ambitious considering how my reading has been going for the last little bit. In addition to that, I also started listening to the audiobook for Writers and Lovers by Lily King, which was not on my May TBR, but I was looking for like an easy sort of short audiobook to read over my COVID quarantine weekend that I thought I could read while like doing house chores or whenever my brain kind of just needed to stop reading an actual page. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes words start blurring together and you're like, okay, enough. Need to do something else. And I realized that the audiobook is like 7 or 8 hours long, and it's a book that's been on my physical TBR forever. So I felt like, okay, let's give it a shot. I had originally planned to listen to like some sort of romance book, but this definitely seemed more up my alley. And I'm about 15% into this. I'm not very far, obviously, it's 15%. But I'm enjoying it so far. I still think I prefer Euphoria more at this point, and I think that's because Euphoria is more historical fiction, and that's more my jam than this book, which does feel more contemporary, and that's okay. I'm still enjoying it. I think the writing is really interesting. It's definitely like Lily King writing for sure, but the main character, Casey, is in her 30s and she's recently lost her mother, which grief plays a large part of what I've read so far, but also she seems to be grieving this relationship she was having. So it's definitely a book that's dealing with two different types of loss and grief, and I'll be interested to see where that goes, because I'm not really sure. I mean, the book itself I think is very relatable for me, not necessarily because of grief and loss, because like thankfully I still have my mother, and I'm not one to get too broken up about relationships, but I think kind of her sense of stasis in this book as a 30-something-year-old is something that is relatable to, I think, most people at some point in their 20s or 30s. Like, life just seems to not be going the way you thought it would when you were like 16 and thought, well, I will have accomplished all of these things by the time I'm 30, sort of thing. Like, it gives me those vibes. So I'll definitely be interested to see where this book ends up going. I do have the audiobook for another 7 days, so hopefully I'll get to listen to that a little bit more, considering there's going to be quite a bit of driving in my future because my new house is an hour north of where I currently live. It'll be really nice to kind of listen to in the car on my way there and on my way back. So hopefully some of that does happen as well. And yeah, that's how I feel about it. Hopefully I'll get to listen to it as an audiobook through and through, but if not, and like the audiobook is recalled or I can't renew it and I haven't finished it, I do have the physical book, so I can always go in that direction. And then the third book that I haven't technically started yet, but I have the book now on Libby as well, is Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. I had put a hold on the one that had the movie tie-in cover, which I think is a more recent audiobook, ages ago, just because the only one that seemed to ever be available was an older audiobook, and sometimes the narration of those older ones is a little bit stiff to me or feels a bit weird and like dated. I don't know why. Let me know if it's just a me thing, but I figured I would have a little bit more success with a more recent audiobook, so I do have that. I am hoping to start to listen to that as well, but I would like to finish like my Writers and Lovers one, because 3 books I've learned is just a little bit too much for me. I can deal with 2 at a time, but when it comes to 3, I start getting overwhelmed and like don't accomplish anything. So like once I finish Writers and Lovers, I'll switch over, but hopefully that'll be a book that I start diving into in the next few days. So that's why I'm going to include it in the currently reading section. But anywho, that is what I've read recently, what I'm currently reading, and as I said, June is just going to be a mood reading month. I'm going to see what I can get through, where I kind of end up, not put the pressure of like a TBR or any readathons on myself, and just kind of enjoy the possibilities, because let's be real, if if you're moving house, don't know how much downtime you have, but we'll see. But anyway, guys, I want to thank my subscribers for bearing with me during this really, really stressful time. I appreciate you sticking around and waiting for my next upload. I know I have been such a flake, but I am hoping that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and I'll be able to be more regular on my channel and get back to my usual routine of filming and editing and all of that stuff. But I do hope that you enjoyed this life update and my talking about the books that I'm currently reading, and definitely let me know what you've been up to reading-wise lately, because I feel like I haven't checked in with you guys in a long while, so definitely let me know. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!